In Sweden, a copy of the Quran was burned in a Stockholm protest. The American President Joe Biden is pushing assault weapon bans renewal following mass shootings in the United States of America. Nigerian President Muhammad Buhari has marked the opening of a $1.5 billion Chinese-funded deep-sea port in Lagos State, Nigeria. Good afternoon, dear viewers. You're tuned in to the 1 p.m. news edition with Hazel OGOIGBE, coming to you live and direct from Golfe TV AFRICA here in the city of Cotonou. Now to the news in detail, starting from the local scene. Now, there was a special court hearing on Saturday, the 21st of January 2023 at the Constitutional Court. Now, the report of the Constitutional Court read that the court rejected the appeal of the Democratic Party disputing the credibility of the legislative elections. More information in the following report. Inside and outside the Constitutional Court on Saturday, the 21st of January 2023, the Democrats stormed the court to hear the pronouncement of the petition against the result of the legislative elections held on the 8th of January 2023. After the reading of the report of the hearing, debate ensued between members and supporters of the Democratic Party. The atmosphere was characterized with annoyance and dissatisfaction of the Democratic Party members. This political party filed an appeal on the 19th of January 2023, demanding the High Court to enjoin the General Election Directorate to provide them with a copy of the compilation report of the results of the 546 districts in Benin within the framework of the legislative elections held on the 8th of January 2023. The reports were allegedly denied access by polling station officials and the district coordinators on the evening of the election. According to the party, the responses from this appeal would enable them lodge an appeal to contest the results, which they consider fraudulent. According to Eric Kuradete, representing the party in court, the reasons given by the district coordinators and polling stations agents for not making these results available was that the printed copies that was to be given to the representatives of the candidates and political party was not sufficient to go round. This argument is considered by the Democratic Party as a violation of the Electoral Code. In contrast to the Democrats, the Autonomous National Electoral Commission, Senai, which is also represented in the courtroom to defend itself, believes that the law does not require it to deliver the report to a political party after the elections. The Autonomous National Electoral Commission also said that the reports required by the political party, the Democrats, before lodging an appeal to contest the results, have already been sent to the Constitutional Court, who obviously used it for the announcement of the final result. After this part of the discussion came the position desired by the report of the hearing. The report of the hearing of the Constitutional Court wants the court to reject the request of the Democratic Party, with the argument that the Democratic Party had a duty to claim the results on the election ground after the vote and not after the election. The Constitutional Court referred to Article 63, 89, 92, and 93 of the Electoral Code, which gives the representatives of the party, the Democrats, the full right to be issued with the minutes of the compilation of the election results immediately after the reading of the report. The floor was again given to the applicant Eric Walter, who explained to the court that he implicitly understands in this report that the party of which is the president would have had to use force and violence to recover the report, whereas his party opted for peace. The three lawyers supporting the political party, the Democrats, at this hearing underlined the inconsistencies, especially on the part where Senai sent the political parties, the Democrats, to go to the Constitutional Court to have the report of the compilation of the results, which they would have already made available, which the court would have already used for the proclamation of the results, and that in turn the Constitutional Court, on the occasion of the same lawsuits, sends the party, the Democrats, back to the election field where it should have demanded for the report. 3 lawyers of the Democratic Party will finish their indictment by demanding in turn that the court does not flout the right of the people if it aspires for a country of peace. Once the floor was given to the defendant, which is Senna, represented by its legal counsel, the Constitutional Court, through the voice of its president, before adjourning the hearing, indicated that the responsibility of peace that the lawyers of the political party of the Democrats speak about does not fall on one person, and that the people do not belong to one camp or to one individual. The verdict of the hearing will be notified to the parties later. It should be recalled that another appeal by Musa Rafi, or the candidate on the Democratic Party list in 2023 legislative elections, had been filed requesting the invalidation of the seat of Colin Benoit, already elected on the Republican bloc list on the 10th Electoral District. The Constitutional Court announced the postponement of the hearing of the second appeal to Thursday, the 26th of January 2023. 81 seats for the pro-government movement, 28 for the Democrats. This is the retained result for the outcome of the 2023 legislative elections in Benin Republic. Over to Nigeria. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has marked the opening of a $1.5 billion Chinese-funded deep-sea port in the commercial hub of Lagos State, Nigeria. The authorities in Nigeria hope this will help grow the West African nation's ailing economy. The port can handle at least 2.5 million 20-foot standard containers per year. More information in the following report.
Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has marked the opening of a $1.5 billion Chinese-funded deep-sea port in the commercial hub of Lagos that authorities hope will help grow the West African nation's ailing economy. The Lekki deep-sea port is one of the biggest in West Africa and will create hundreds of thousands of jobs in addition to easing cargo congestion that costs billions of dollars in annual revenue, the Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu said on Monday. The port can handle at least 2.5 million 20-foot standard containers per year and will be operated as a joint venture between the Nigerian government, Singapore-based Tolaram Group, and the Chinese state-owned China Harbour Engineering Company. Both foreign companies own a majority stake of 75% in the project. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, but growth has been stalled for many years due to poor infrastructure and mismanagement. Although it has 6 major seaports, more than 80% of the country's imports are handled by just 2 of the ports in Lagos, where congestion has led to a massive loss in revenue, as cargoes are often diverted to other West African nations. Authorities say the new deep-sea port on the eastern edge of Lagos would divert traffic from congested ports and shore up earnings, with expected economic benefit of more than $360 billion. Experts, however, argue it will make a minimal difference if existing pitfalls are not removed, including ensuring connection between port and inland areas, with the first ship due to dock on Sunday. Agriculture and trade are key drivers of Nigeria's economy, but widespread insecurity in the agricultural-rich north, dwindling foreign direct investment, and endemic corruption have slowed economic growth amid reduced earnings from crude oil. The government has turned to international lenders and funders to help grow the economy through critical projects, among them China, whose footprint on some of Nigeria's most important infrastructure projects, such as rail networks and airport terminals.
Moroccan lawmakers on Monday voted unanimously to review ties with the European Parliament, accusing it of meddling after a resolution that urged the kingdom to respect press freedom. Now, members of both houses of Morocco's parliament met in the capital Rabat for a joint session in response to the non-binding European text adopted on Thursday. Moroccan lawmakers on Monday voted unanimously to review ties with the European Parliament, accusing it of meddling after a resolution that urged the kingdom to respect press freedom. Members of both houses of Morocco's parliament met in the capital Rabat for a joint session in response to the non-binding European text adopted on Thursday. In a statement after their session, the Moroccan legislatures called the European resolution an unacceptable attack against the sovereignty, dignity, and independence of judicial institutions in the kingdom. As a result, Morocco's parliament decided to reconsider its relations with the European Parliament and submit them for an overall evaluation. Under 1996 agreements, Morocco and the European Union have been linked in tight economic and commercial relations, particularly in the area of agriculture and fishing. European lawmakers in Strasbourg had urged Morocco to respect freedom of expression and media freedom and to guarantee imprisoned journalists a fair trial. The Reporters Without Borders watchdog welcomed the European Union Parliament vote as a break with the 25 years of passivity. Some lawmakers saw Morocco's former colonial power France as pushing the European measure. Talzi, whose party belongs to the majority coalition, was referring to warming ties between Paris and Algeria, Morocco's neighbors and rival, and a major exporter of gas to European nations. Two of the most prominent journalist cases in Morocco are those of Omar Radi and Souleymane Rassouni, both sentenced at appeal last year on sexual abuse charges. Radi, aged 36, who has been critical of Moroccan authorities, was sentenced to 6 years in prison for rape and espionage, charges he denies. Rassouni, on the other hand, is serving a 5-year sentence. He too has always maintained his innocence and says he was persecuted because of his opinion.
Today, the Moroccan Parliament wished to recall that we are there with an outstretched hand and that we are a strategic partner, a reliable partner on whom Europe can count, and will demand a little more respect from its institutions. We've sent a clear message that we need to review the status and the relations with the European Parliament. We must assess what has been done and what must be done, but we cannot keep ignoring it like that. And they come and change their minds and teach us lessons. We are a country with roots and centuries of civilization, and we cannot accept that someone acts like this and starts lecturing us senselessly.
Moroccan authorities insist the judiciary is independent and that cases against journalists have nothing to do with journalism. Last week, European parliamentarians also said they were deeply concerned by allegations that Moroccan authorities had bribed its members and reaffirmed the European Parliament's commitment to fully investigating corruption. The corruption scandal involving MEPs that erupted last month sent shockwaves through the European Union circle in Brussels, with the MEPs accused of taking bribes from Qatar as well as Morocco. Both countries vehemently deny the accusations. Following European resolution, an authorized source at the Foreign Ministry in Rabat, quoted by a media outlet close to the government, said the European Union measures will have no impact on Morocco. The source said it fits with the aggression and harassment sustained by the kingdom from those disturbed by Morocco's development, prosperity, and strong rule in the region. Olympic. Congolese Citizens Movement stated on Tuesday in Kinshasa that the electoral process for the December 20 presidential election was very badly underway, saying they feared fraud and a denial of democracy. Moving over to Uganda. Now, Uganda on Tuesday launched the drilling of its first oil well, a key milestone as the country races to meet its target of the first oil output in 2025. Now, the development comes 17 years after the discovery of commercial oil deposits in the East African country of Uganda.
On Tuesday, launched the drilling of its first oil well, a key milestone as the country races to meet its target of first oil output in 2025. President Yoweri Museveni cut the ribbon at the site operated by China National Offshore Oil Company near Lake Albert in Kikube District. The field, known as Kingfisher, is expected to produce 40,000 barrels of oil per day at its peak, according to Uganda's oil industry regulator. The development comes 17 years after the discovery of commercial oil deposits in the East African country. France Total, the operator of the second project, known as Tilenga, is expected to begin drilling in March. Uganda last week issued a license for the construction of $3.5 billion pipeline set to carry crude oil from the country to international markets. Last year, the oil majors signed a $10 billion agreement to develop the Uganda oil fields and build the pipeline. At peak, Uganda plans to produce about 230,000 barrels of crude oil per day. Uganda's reserves are estimated 6.5 billion barrels of crude, of which about 1.4 billion are considered recoverable.
Crossing briefly to the United States, relationship with African countries. Now, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen used a tour of the Dino Ken Game Reserve in Southern Africa on Wednesday to announce a joint initiative to combat wildlife trafficking and related criminal activities in the United States and South Africa. Now, Yellen's announcement of a joint wildlife trafficking task force at a reserve that is home to lions, leopards, elephants, and critically endangered black rhinos could help key South African industries. Still on that, Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, pays Zambia a visit, and in the visit, she assured the Zambian government officials that restructuring the country's debt was a priority for the United States. More information in the following report.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen spent most of her visit to Zambia Tuesday talking about the agricultural investment potential of African nations, especially as Russia's invasion of Ukraine has affected hunger and the cost of food worldwide. In a village in Changwe, an hour from the capital Lusaka, Yellen emphasized not only tackling acute food needs, but also scaling up investment in food system resilience for the long term. Speaking to a group of mostly female farmers participating in the U.S.-backed Green Climate Fund for small-scale agriculture operations, the Treasury Secretary also voiced support of including Africa more in global food fertilizer markets and supply chains. On Monday, she met with Zambia's president and its finance minister, whom she assured that restructuring of the country's debt was a priority for the United States. Zambia was the first African country to default on its foreign debt, estimated at about $17 billion during the COVID pandemic. The country has asked for help through the Group of 20's so-called Common Framework, but implementation has been slow, with the U.S. accusing China of slowing down the process. But Yellen said she was encouraged after meeting last week with the Chinese vice premier in Switzerland.
Let me say, I know that the Chinese have been a barrier to concluding the negotiation. I specifically raised the issue of Zambia and asked for their cooperation in trying to reach a speedy resolution.
China's foreign minister, who recently visited 5 African countries, has rejected claims that China has not been committed to helping Africa ease its debt burden, insisting his country is an active participant in the G20 debt service suspension initiative. Before Zambia, Yellen visited Senegal, where she met with Senegalese President Macky Sall, his finance minister, and other officials. She also spent time at a business incubator with women entrepreneurs. Yellen will wrap up her tour with a visit on Wednesday to South Africa, where Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had talks on Monday with his South African counterpart Naledi Pandor. Russia is pushing to strengthen ties with an historical ally amid the war in Ukraine. South Africa was among several African nations in the United Nations General Assembly that abstained from a vote calling for Russia to be suspended from the Human Rights Council.
It was a wake-up call to the United States, the vote that took place in April of last year, where the United States tried to rally the world to condemn the Russian invasion, and it really fell short, specifically on the African continent. And I think it was a reminder that if you want to be the leader of the free world, you have to try to lead that world. And if people aren't willing to follow the call for democracy and liberty, then you have real worries on your hands.
Next on the list of U.S. cabinet members to visit Africa is U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, who plans to travel to Ghana, Mozambique, and Kenya starting Wednesday.
Crossing to the news in brief, the trial of former Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Abdelaziz opened on Wednesday in Nouakchott, offering the exceptional image of a former head of state placed in a cage-like box to answer for illicit enrichment. Away from that, crossing over to the foreign scene, Sweden should not expect Turkey's support for its NATO membership bid after a copy of the Quran was burned in a Stockholm protest, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan stated on Monday. Now, the far-right Danish Sweden's politician Rasmus Paludan burnt a copy of the Quran during a protest last Saturday afternoon outside the Turkish embassy in Stockholm.
Condemnation in Yemen's capital Sana'a against the burning of the Quran, Islam's sacred scripture. The incident in Sweden has caused outrage in parts of the Middle East.
It's important to boycott Sweden. It's become our duty.
In Iraq's capital, Baghdad, protesters gathered in front of the Swedish embassy, calling for its closure.
This is offensive to all Muslims. We don't want it to happen again. And we're calling on the European Union to condemn such insults to religions.
On Saturday, Rasmus Paludan, head of a far-right Danish party, held a protest in front of Turkey's embassy in Stockholm. The Swedish-Danish national set fire to the Quran. Sweden's Prime Minister called the act deeply disrespectful, but defended the right to free speech. That has put Sweden's NATO application in jeopardy. Accession to the military alliance must be approved unanimously by member states, including Turkey.
It is clear that those who allowed such vileness to take place in front of our embassy can no longer expect any charity from us regarding their NATO membership application. Sorry, but we said this at the beginning. So you will let terror organizations run wild on your avenues and streets and then expect our support for getting into NATO? That's not happening.
Sweden and Turkey appeared to be making headway in NATO negotiations. The Quran provocation is putting their ties to the test yet again.
Good day, dear viewers. Welcome to today's edition of the African Newspaper Review in English, coming to you live and direct from Golfe TV Africa here in the city of Cotonou. And as usual, I have lots of newspapers for your viewing pleasure. I have the Daily News, Citizen Tanzania, The Punch Nigeria, just to mention a few. Now let's get started with stories trending on the African scene. And this is on the Daily News Zimbabwe. Now the story reads, "Justice is blind," the minister asserts. And this is coming after the United States of America, that is, criticizes arrest of opposition supporters. I believe in a democracy, you should always have opposition and they should be allowed to freely express themselves. Now, still on the pages of the Daily News Zimbabwe, this story says, "Poverty raises heart disease," on the pages of the Daily News. And on the Daily News it says, "Mangwena Wanostela Chiwese," with a new single, on the pages of the Daily News Zimbabwe. Now, crossing away from the Daily News, we are still on the African scene, touching the stories that are trending on the African scene. Now let's cross over to the pages of the Citizen Tanzania. The Citizen Tanzania happens to be one of my favorite stories because every time we open the pages of the Citizen Tanzania, it's always stories of positivity and always good stories on the pages of the Citizen Tanzania. Now let's get started. On the pages of the Citizen Tanzania, this story reads, "Lissu hits the ground running," and it says the Chadema leader, who has been in exile for the better part of the past 5 years, spared no time after London in Tanzania yesterday, joining his party in calling for a new constitution. Once an activist or always an activist. On the pages of the Citizen, the story reads, What Samia seeks to achieve with DC lineup. That full story is on the Citizen Tanzania pages 2. And the story is talking about tech. It says, tech guru unlocking infinite possibilities. If you know you're curious about the kind of infinite possibilities, you need to check the pages of the Citizen. And the story here reads, regional corporation Somalia likely to join the EAC this year. If you know you're curious, you want to find out more of that story, you could check the pages of the Citizen Tanzania. Now let's cross over to the pages of the front page Liberia. Let's see the stories that are making the round in Liberia today. Now on the front page Liberia, the stories making the rounds goes thus. And I can see a man bound behind, and the story says, police launching probe and arrest 6 suspects, including the uncle of the victim. And it says 2-year-old murdered and mutilated. Not just was the 2-year-old murdered, but the child was actually mutilated. And it says for a 2-year-old child to be murdered in cold blood and body parts extracted is painful, and it should not be tolerated in our society. The perpetrators should be brought to book. Where they are found guilty, they deserve harsh punishment. And this is a former senator in Liberia that is speaking. He's from the Borni County. And still on the pages of the front page Liberia, this story says, Deputy Speaker says Liberia must not be a nation of fishermen, calls on investors to create a fishing industry, and says do not be like Firestone on the pages of the front page Liberia. We're still on the African scene, touching the stories that are making the rounds on the African scene. Now let's cross over to the pages of This Day Nigeria. Decided to add a bit of variation rather than using the Nation right now. I've decided to use the This Day Nigeria. Now let's see the stories that are making the rounds on This Day Nigeria on the pages of This Day. And this is a top story reading, Buhari takes train ride after inaugurating phase 1 of the Lagos Blue. Okay, let me clean that to be able to see. And it says Buhari takes train ride after inaugurating phase 1 of the Lagos Blue Rail Line. Apparently, after inaugurating it, he wants to show that I am not above the law and I could actually enter into a train. Now, still on the pages of This Day Nigeria, this is on politics, and it's saying Atiku, that is the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, saying, I will change our security, underlining this word, security architecture. I will grow economy. And Tinubu, on the other hand, which is the presidential candidate of the All Progressive Congress, saying, I will end youth frustration in Nigeria if elected. Campaigns are really getting hotter. The elections are just days away, so everything is intensifying. Now let's cross over to the Central Bank of Nigeria, saying Emefiele forecloses extension of January 31 deadline for the return of old banknotes on the pages of This Day Nigeria. And still on the This Day Nigeria, it says National Assembly members kick and the House of Representatives set up committee to meet CBN Bank CEOs on the redesigned currency. And we cannot take the punch, Nigeria, because my time is far spent. Dear viewers, this is why I conclude today's edition of the African Newspaper Review on Golfe TV Africa and also the 1 p.m. news on Golfe TV Africa. I am Hazel OGOIGBE. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day.